And I remember sitting in that clinic room. It was 23rd of December, seeing all those couples desperately waiting to find out if they were going to get bad news just before Christmas. Thinking, thank God, I never have to go through this again. And I got called into the room and my breast surgeon sat me down and held my hand and she said, right, there were 13 centimetres of cancer left in your breast and it spread to 2 of the lymph nodes. And I wasn't prepared for that. And suddenly everything shut down. And I remember every single detail of that conversation, what she was wearing, the weather, what I said, everything. It's suddenly hyper acute. And I just thought, my world is over.
Hello and welcome to the Thrive Against Cancer podcast, where we give a voice to the cancer community. My name is Toby Freeman, founder and CEO of the Robin Cancer Trust, cancer advocate and your host. Every episode we will be hosting open and honest conversations with people affected by cancer, whether personally, as a family member, clinician or charities and organisations. We will be talking to the cancer community about the cancer community and all the things that are important to you.
Our guest today was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer whilst working as a consultant breast surgeon in 2015, aged just 40. Her first book, The Complete Guide to the Breast Cancer, How to Feel Empowered and Take Control, was her way of helping women when a local recurrence forced her to retire. Her best-selling memoir, Under the Knife, shares her experience of life as a female surgeon before becoming a patient herself. She is the top 100 female key opinion leaders in oncology to follow on social media, and she hosts the podcast So Now I've Got Breast Cancer. She continues to help patients with evidence-based videos to explain and demystify cancer treatments and talk globally about how to improve cancer care. Our guest today is Dr. Liz O'Riordan. Welcome, Liz. Thank you so much for joining us. And we really want to delve into every part of your journey. So shall we go back to the start and just talk to us a bit about your career as a breast surgeon? Because that sounds really exciting, but equally that's led you into what you do today.
It has. So as a junior trainee, I loved every surgical speciality. I was just amazed at everything. Wow, it's bowels and wow, it's blood vessels. It's all amazing. And I couldn't work out what to do. And one of my mentors said that you pick the speciality with the body fluid you mind the least. And there aren't really any body fluids for breast surgery, maybe a bit of a sweaty armpit from time to time. But also there's no on-call, there's no emergency work. And because I just started dating my now husband, who is also a surgeon, if I did a speciality like bowel surgery, we would never see each other. But over the time of my training, breast surgery changed. So when I first did it, it was almost slash and grab that you did at the end of a general list. But suddenly it was a term called oncoplastic. So using plastic surgery techniques to reduce breasts and reconstruct them and hide scars around the nipple. And I just loved it. What I didn't get, though, was the stress of being a cancer surgeon and potentially telling 10 women every Friday they've got cancer, it's come back, they need chemotherapy. That psychological impact of breaking bad news constantly and trying to do it well was really, really hard. And as a trainee, you don't get it because you're not responsible, but suddenly as the consultant, you are. And I wasn't prepared for that. But I love my job. It was like origami and dressmaking and tailoring, and you get to speak to your patients and follow them up. I just loved it.
Sort of every day is different, I suppose. Every day is sort of exciting.
There's no anatomy, but every breast is different. Every patient is different. Every operation you do is different. And that smile, I used to have women flash me in Sainsbury's saying, look, you can't see my scar. I show everybody. And to see that joy on someone's face when they came in expecting to going flat, having a mastectomy, and I can do an implant nipple sparing reconstruction and they feel whole again. Oh, it's just the most amazing feeling.
I mean, going from that area, I definitely know that feeling of being, I really admire the work that breast surgeons do. It's just incredible.
Oh, thank you. It's a lot of stitching, a lot of sewing. And I thought I knew everything there was to know about breast cancer. And then I got it myself and I realized I know nothing about what it's like to actually be a patient going through all those treatments.
So this was back in July 2015?
Yeah, that's right. I was 40. I'd had a couple of breast cysts. I'd found lumps 2 or 3 years earlier. I have very breasts full of cysts, which is common in your late 30s, 40s as you're starting to get closer towards the menopause. And I never checked my breasts. I'm a breast surgeon. I'm not going to get breast cancer. I'm invincible, like most women out there. And I came out of the shower and I just saw a lump in my cleavage. And I just thought it was another cyst. I'd had a normal mammogram 9 months before. It couldn't be anything, but I was wrong.
So how did you actually find out? Did you go and see one of your colleagues or did you go to the doctor?
So I work at Ipswich Hospital, but I didn't want my own team to see me. I don't want them talking about me behind my back. Not that they would, but it was just I don't want them to know what's going on with me. I didn't think this was cancer.
Yeah.
So I went to a hospital just down the road where my husband worked, where I'd trained. So the woman I saw was my mentor, a friend, and we didn't think it was cancer. My mammogram was normal. I had very dense breasts. And then I had an ultrasound. And because I do ultrasounds myself, Laura, I looked at the screen and I saw a cancer. And my surgeon came in whilst they were drawing up the anesthetic for a biopsy and said, "Where do you want to be treated? Because I don't know I can." We knew. And the hard bit about having all the knowledge I did was I knew I need chemo. I knew I need a mastectomy. I had a good idea what my odds of being alive in 10 years were.
You're
And
too
it was like
involved. Yeah.
yeah, I know everything. I've looked after women younger than me who have sadly died, and I can't not know that knowledge. And then I'm like, well, how much of the scary stuff in my head do I tell my mum and my dad and my husband? And it was really, really weird. And it felt like it was happening to someone else. And I started chemo within 2 weeks.
It's quite normal, that feeling of someone else. I definitely had that. I know other people have said that. It's a very out of body experience. It's almost like
Yeah.
someone is talking to you in a very different way.
And you're kind of looking down on it happening. And I
Yeah.
think it's that self-preservation because it's just too much to take in.
It's a lot of information. And as you say, you knew everything, which is, I was very naive to what was to come. You would have known exactly where your sort of future lay in terms of treatment plan. How did it feel? Because obviously, as I say, you've given this news to probably hundreds of women over the years. But how did it feel you getting that news yourself in your own, feeling?
So I think the first time it wasn't like bad news. I remember I rang after I'd had the ultrasound, I went home and rang my mum and said, "I'll be telling you I've got breast cancer in a week."
Okay.
I know. I know I have it. It was like that had gone in. So when I went back in a week, and actually I told my husband, because he still didn't believe me, I said, if the breast care nurse comes to get us, it's cancer, because they don't bring a breast care nurse if it's not. And everyone was crying. My boss was crying. My husband was crying. Another breast surgeon I worked with was crying. And I was like, yeah, I know this. But it's when I went back to get my results after chemo that it was proper bad news. So I'd had chemo. My cancer was actually 6.5 centimeters on an MRI, truly occult. And not truly occult. It was 6.5 centimeters. Chemo had shrunk it completely. And I'd had a mastectomy. I knew my lymph nodes were normal. And I remember sitting in that clinic room. It was 23rd of December, seeing all those couples desperately waiting to find out if they were going to get bad news just before Christmas, thinking, thank God I never have to go through this again.
Mm.
And I got called into the room and my breast surgeon sat me down and held my hand and she said, right, there were 13 centimeters of cancer left in your breast and it spread to 2 of the lymph nodes. And I wasn't prepared for that. And suddenly everything shut down. And I remember every single detail of that conversation, what she was wearing, the weather, what I said, everything. It's suddenly hyper acute. And I just thought, my world is over. I don't know how to cope with this. All I want to do is to walk out of this room screaming and swearing, saying, this is not fair. But instead, I had to sit and be examined and hear about what would come next. And that I suddenly got what it's like to be on the receiving end of what I do every day.
And that must be a really surreal experience because, as I say, you've really dealt with these women in the past and had to deliver the news. Did you feel that from that point, and I think I've heard you speak about it, but that actually what advice you gave your patients prior was not necessarily the advice you would actually have given them now, knowing what you know?
Yeah, so I think I was a good surgeon. I told them everything they needed to know to cope with the side effects of surgery and how to cope with that. And my job was to kind of give them a warning hit if they needed chemo or radiotherapy and tell them a bit about what I thought the side effects were. Yeah. But I realized I'd never heard my own oncologist consent someone for chemo. I'd never seen a radiotherapy machine, yet I was telling them about what I thought the side effects were. So I learned a lot that although we work in a team, we're very separate. But I realized that I needed to know how to cope with the drugs and the treatment and how bad would the side effects be and how do I live for the rest of my life and deal with the fear of recurrence. And I don't think it was my job as a surgeon to tell them all of that, but I never checked to see if my breast care nurses were telling them that. Were we giving them that right information? Were we signposting them? And again, we only get 10 minutes per consultation. It's not enough. But I think breast cancer is a chronic illness, whether it's primary or stage 4. You are living with side effects, physical and mental, for the rest of your life. And I didn't help people. I never talked about sex. I said you might get a bit of a dry vagina, and that was it. I never told them how to fix that dry vagina. I thought someone else would. And it's been really eye-opening to see what patients actually want and need to hear to help them cope after I've done my fancy stitching.
I think that's the thing. There's so many side effects that actually don't get spoken about, especially in the early days. I think it's very much, you might get into menopause because of the drugs. You might get, it brushes over all the side effects to a point, but you never go nitty gritty. And I think, like in your job, and especially an oncologist's job, it's to, get us back on the road, isn't it? But we forget that actually, once you're on the road, where does that road take us? And there's so many other areas. Yeah. And
it's like tiredness.
Yeah.
I didn't get what cancer fatigue was like. You and I both know it. It's bone crippling. You just can't do anything. And I didn't get it. Yeah. And I get patients come in after radiotherapy saying, why am I so tired? I think, surely you must have got over this by now. I never listened to patients, whether I was ignorant. I didn't want to. I thought I knew everything. And I think the beauty of what you are doing so many people are doing on social media, talking about the reality of living with breast cancer, to try and raise awareness and say, look, we need help for life.
Definitely. I think social media is so powerful. So powerful. You have since obviously written a very amazing book all about your breast cancer, a guide to breast cancer. So all about your journey, but also what you would tell people. What made you write a book about your journey?
Oh, so it all started. I told Twitter the day after I was diagnosed. I couldn't cold cap because I have migraines, and I'd be recognized in the hospital with bold because I worked there. And I thought, I don't want to hide this. It's not a guilty secret. I don't want people talking about me behind my back. So my husband and I pressed send together on a tweet saying, I've got breast cancer, things going to be different. And a couple of amazing doctors reached out to me, the late Kate Granger, who was behind the Hello, My Name Is campaign, and a woman called Trish Greenhouse. Now, Trish is a professor of evidence-based medicine and a GP, and her books got me through my stats exams to become a consultant surgeon. She's like the goddess of understanding stats. I don't do maths. And she DM'd me to say, I'm having chemo on the same day as you for breast cancer, but I've not told anybody. And I suddenly had 3 doctors who I could talk to and share what it was like being a doctor and a patient. And Trish and I are expert doctors, and between us, we bought 20 books written by patients, desperately trying to find out the reality of going through treatment. And as we started exploring forums, we were terrified by the information people were getting back. Like, is it safe to have sex during chemo because my husband's hair will fall out? And do I do this diet or do that? And we thought, right, we want to create one resource where everything you need to know is in one place, from diagnosis to death, diet, fear, sex, everything. And that was something that gave us a bit of power because neither of us could be doctors whilst we were going through treatment. So we wrote that, hoping that it would help women stop and men having to stop searching the internet and just have that one resource.
Yeah, Dr. Google's not good. You don't want to be Dr. Google.
And I used to tell patients, don't Google. I mean, this was back in 2015. Was I will tell you everything you need to know. It's crap. Pardon my French, because the first thing when Mum was diagnosed, I was on Google.
Everyone does
go there and everyone does it. And I think we need to start digitally signposting people to say, look, you've been diagnosed with this. Here are a load of great influencers, websites, apps, and books that women before you have found useful. Go here. Send your family here. This will help.
Did you find it kind of almost a coping mechanism as well by writing? Because it's sort of, I know everyone, you need a purpose, I think, after having a diagnosis. Because am I right to say you didn't go back to being a surgeon, or you did go back for a bit and couldn't carry on?
I did. So it took me 18, I had a year of treatment, chemosurgery, radiotherapy, everything. And it took me about 6 months to negotiate going back to work. So if a consultant is on maternity leave, you're off and then you go back. But when you've had your own cancer treatment, we needed to find a way of just testing. Was it safe for me to be a doctor? Was it safe for my patients? And I had 6 months of shadowing at a local hospital so they could say, you're not up to it. And that was really, really hard. because when I was breaking bad news, I was just looking at the woman in front of me crumpling, and I thought, I can't operate because I've got post-mastectomy pain syndrome, and what I'm doing could hurt you. And it was really hard to get that mask back on. The writing helped. And actually, it was my husband who said, start a blog. I didn't know what a blog was. There weren't many at the time. But the couple I found were like Slash Poison Burn. And I think a lot of us are very extreme on social media because that's what gets people in. And I wanted to say, common sense, friendly, not scary. This is what's happening. This is how you can help. And the writing, that was kind of a bit like therapy, but it gave me a purpose. I could still be a doctor. I could still help people. I was shadowing at Adam Brooks for about 6 months, and I went back to work. And I'd only been back at work for about 4 or 5 months as a surgeon when I was diagnosed with a local recurrence. And I went home one day, I got the results of the biopsy, and I never went back. Psychologically, I couldn't cope, and physically, I could no longer operate. My arm just didn't work properly. But I wrote my memoir under the knife during lockdown. I wanted to actually talk about my depression. I'd had suicidal depression twice as a consultant. I'd had depression for most of my life, and it's a very different kind of mental illness you get now. But as a doctor, I was terrified what patients would think if they found out. My doctor's got depression. Is it safe for her to operate on me? Is she the crazy lady? And because I was no longer working, I felt I could write about that. But actually writing my journey, that was therapy. And I think I needed to relive all the scary, dark places I went to just to kind of distance myself and move on. Do you use writing to help?
I do. And I think that's why I really do social media, because it's an outlet, isn't it? And it's kind of a way of putting down your thoughts in your head, your fears, your everything that you think of, putting it on paper, whether it's in a journal or on social media or in a blog. It's a way, I felt, of kind of almost taking it from my mind, putting it somewhere that I knew I could always go back to. I could always see. It's like putting back into the box, isn't it? That box can always be opened. You can always reread that blog or re-look at that social media post. But you can sort of allow your brain to rest from it and not be constantly thinking it. So I think it's a very powerful tool. I don't know about you though, but I found when I went through chemotherapy, like I was not a writer before. Like I would, if someone had said write 100 words, I would have probably sat there and it took me a week. But chemotherapy almost changed the way my brain operated, and I wanted to write. I wanted to put it pen to paper. So I don't know, and I sort of found that the whole way through my journey, actually, when I've sort of gone through a really tough time, the treatment's harder, that's when I want to put more down. That's when my mind goes into this sort of overdrive of overthinking, and writing has really, really helped that. You do hear it a lot. You do hear that people should journal, people should blog, people should just do a bit more creativity, because it really does help. And it's a way of remembering.
Remembering
what you've gone through.
I went back and read my blog yesterday. Did this actually really happen to me? I think for me, it's distancing myself. I don't want to share my dark thoughts with my husband, because then he has to cope with the dark thoughts and I have to look after him. But just writing them down on paper just helps. But I wanted to ask, do you ever think you share too much when you're sharing the dark stuff? Because I find a lot of what I do is positive, and whenever I share, actually, I'm having a really tough day, I worry about people who know me well, who think, well, why am I finding out you're depressed on social media? Why haven't you told me? You want to be real, but my husband worries that I share too much, and actually the world doesn't need to know how you're feeling. But to me, I want them to know.
But does it help you? Because that's the thing, I think. It's like, as long as it's helping you, like we're very bad in the UK at talking about sort of depression, about mental health, about our dark, deepest fears, about death. And that's the thing, like, I feel that you have to have these discussions in order to be at peace with certain things. And there's certain people I can have open conversations with, but equally, actually, it's weird. Putting a post on Instagram to thousands of people seems less scary than sitting with your best mate telling them.
No, I get it.
And it is less scary. And it's more, I don't know, you feel that someone else is going to understand. Someone else is going to send you that message and say, I also get it. And this is where the community comes in, doesn't it? And you've probably found this by blogging, by podcasting, by writing, is you connect with people who really, truly get it. And that is so beneficial. And I'm sure, your experience of what you've done in the past in your work has really helped people, because you can tell them and reassure them and maybe discuss with them topics that they wouldn't be able to discuss with even another breast cancer patient, because they don't also understand it from a surgeon's point of view, from a medical point of view. I mean, sometimes you probably get asked too much because you have that doctoring experience. It's that balance, isn't it, of not constantly being the doctor in the room.
I know. And I think it's also, I want to be honest. If all people see is me looking fabulous in yellow and doing this and that, they think, oh God, I can't possibly compete with her. And actually, I'll put up a post saying, I haven't exercised for a month. I'm really flat. I'm doing this. This is my reality. So they know that what you're doing is potentially achievable. You're not perfect. You're not Superwoman. And I think it's hard being that vulnerable. I would never have been that vulnerable before cancer.
Oh gosh, no, I wouldn't too.
Sod it, this is my journey and I want to document it. And it is the reality.
I would have never flashed my boobs on social media before cancer, but hey.
Me neither, I know.
What we do for, the confidence you get given, isn't it, after you've had something. And also it's that you stare that fear of, your mortality straight in the eye, and you're kind of like, this may end one way. And you've constantly got that, even as a primary patient, you've constantly got that fear. But it kind of kicks.
I've had 2 local recurrences, so I know it's more likely to happen. I feel like it really is a ticking time bomb. And when Mum was diagnosed with metastatic bone cancer, seeing her go from diagnosis to death in 5 months was really humbling, scary, shocking, terrifying. And I think as a cancer patient, seeing someone die of cancer, that survivor's guilt that we get is really, really hard. And I had to realize, I stopped looking at my stats and worrying how big is my risk of dying. There aren't enough people like me to know, and thinking we're all going to die and we don't talk about it and we don't prepare for it and we don't do our wills. And when you think, like the amount of planning we have when someone has a baby, whereas death is the one thing that happens to all of us. And I actually found by telling my husband, can we do our wills, and talking about it was a huge weight off my shoulders.
It's scary, isn't it? It's scary to kind of stare death in the face, but at the same time, equally, you feel at kind of peace knowing it's done, it's there, it's protected. If something does happen, I mean, I'm always telling my friends, get a will. You don't need to be having a cancer diagnosis or potentially seeing your future or end to have one. But we all know that life is so precious, and it really gives us that kick, doesn't it, to kind of just live life how we want to. And I'm sure, you being surgeon, you never expected to be maybe hosting a podcast or writing books. You've had a massive shift in the way your life has gone, but equally you're just sort of grabbing all the opportunities with both hands, and sharing your experience is helping so many people. In terms of do you feel quite pressure in that? Because I know, you do now have a podcast, which is called So Now I've Got Breast Cancer. And you've obviously, you do a huge amount of educational work online.
Yeah.
How do you find being that sort of influencer within that community and having that pressure on you?
It's really hard. So the Liz before cancer was an introvert who would never share her private life. She'd never write about her sex life in the Mail on Sunday. I was a complete introvert. I did this because I have a burning desire to help people. And I lost my purpose when I lost my job. And this is a way for me to keep doing it, but it's hard. I live in the middle of the country. I don't have many friends nearby. I quite like my own company, and I could very easily spend all day not talking to anybody. So this is a way of kind of reaching out and interacting with people, and I need that. And I love what I do. So my next book, The Cancer Roadmap, came about from one of my Instagram reels, because I now get a lot of people sending me things they hear about misinformation. Soursop and mushrooms and green tea. And is it true that this woman cured herself with an injection? And this is all about explaining and debunking cancer myths with science. I could do my job, my job that doesn't pay me any money, 24 hours a day for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. And I've really enjoyed the creative side of working out how can I explain breast cancer using oranges and candles.
I saw your apple.
That's been fun.
Your apple bashing apple.
I upset quite a few people, because if you had stage 3 cancer, it's quite aggressive. And if you haven't seen the reel, don't worry. But it's been fun trying to find ways to explain technical stuff simply. So I'm really enjoying that. But I get asked questions on all the channels every day of the week. And it's hard to remember, I'm not their doctor. I can't give medical advice. I want to help everybody. I don't have the time. And whilst I am giving all this information as a breast surgeon and patient to them, when do I find the time to just be me and to just be a patient and to live in my own world and have a day where I don't talk about breast cancer all the time? And I think a lot of it is very good for me, for my denial. It's not happening to me. I put, like, when I'm speaking abroad, I put on my doctor head, and I can make a room full of men cry, telling them what it's like to have cancer, and I don't feel it. And I think that's why every once in a while I just wish something bad would happen, and I don't, but just so I could clear the decks and just get some breathing space. Um, it's a really hard place to be because you feel you owe your community constant updates, knowledge, videos, and I feel guilty if I haven't posted anything for 3 weeks. And it's remembering, although I love all these people, they are strangers, and I don't owe them anything, and I have done enough. It's such a hard balance. I mean, you must find it hard at times as well when you
Oh,
get good days and bad days.
totally. I mean, I've very much changed my attitude. I think before I was very like that, like needing to post constantly, worrying if I'm not posting. Now I'm like, oh, well, I don't need those hundreds of likes on that post, because really,
No.
as long as I'm happy with the content I'm creating and the people that it's going out to, and
Yeah.
someone sees it, I don't need to be, I don't know, what's the word? Like, I just don't need everyone to want to like or see it or
Yeah.
follow me. I just think I do it for me. And that's the important part, is you've
Yeah.
got to do it what's right for you. And I also think if I have
Yeah.
a break from it and want a week off, I don't feel bad. I used to be like, oh, must post, must post. But now I'm like, no, I need that holiday. I need that break. I need that change of direction. Like, even when you're away, like, I try now to talk about my holidays rather than how I feel about cancer on my holidays.
Yeah.
But I mean, so yeah, that
And
brings us nicely on to, how do you cope outside of that? What do you do to kind of take you away
oh,
from cancer?
not enough.
Okay.
Um, I like the writing and the research, and that gets me out of my head. I loved researching my next book. It was like doing my PhD again, just getting lost down a rabbit hole of scientific papers. My brain needs to be stimulated all the while. I've got ideas for thrillers. I want to kill people on a train. I promise not to do it in public if you're sat next to me. I really like that side of opening up my brain. Exercise helps, but I'm going to be honest, I've not done anything for a month.
Mm-hmm.
I was really, really rough with the side effects of palbociclib, neutropenic, no energy, and it's finding it really hard. I know I need to get out there, but it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I love doing knitting and crochet and making my own clothes. I think it's a surgeon in me. I need to be doing something with my hands. So I'm teaching myself to knit with one hand in mum's memory.
Wow.
That really helps me. I've done a bit of wild swimming. There's a great group of women near me. We swim in local rivers, but I've not been since dad died in the summer. It's just this block of getting yourself going again.
Loss is always hard, isn't it? Loss with anyone. I think,
Yeah.
especially a parent or a family member, because you're
Well,
also,
I've lost two parents in 18 months. I've had a
wow.
book come out. There's a lot going on, and you're kind of waiting for it to hit me. I think I need to do a lot more. I think I need to learn that no is a complete sentence. And I think I do too much. I don't think I can carry on with YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, Blue Sky, Facebook, TikTok, and a podcast, and the book, and the speaking. And I think at some point I need to drop one of them
Or a few.
because I'm a perfectionist
Yeah.
and I'm trying to do too much, and there's not enough time for me. It's really hard. And I think it's honest to say, when you are a content creator, it can be all purposing. And you think, well, I'm going to try not look at my phone in the evening. But when your phone is for you catching up, then you get down a work thing, and it's really, really hard.
It's
What
a
about you?
balance. Oh gosh, yeah, I find the same. I mean, I very much stick to Instagram just because I don't have the capacity to. I've tried to dabble in like TikTok, and I don't know. I talk Facebook's more for my personal, like for my family and friends, and
Yeah.
my personal photos, and a bit more about, my legacy for them. Instagram, as I say, is I like it. I use it. I know how to use it because they're all so different. This is the trouble. All these
I
different
know.
platforms. But I just think you have to be able to put something away, and actually just focus on being you and as a patient.
Yeah.
And so I think that's how I cope with it. I'm like, right, I can be Laura the cancer patient. I can be Laura the Instagrammer. I still find it very weird, people calling me an influencer, because I don't really like that terminology. I just say I talk about my life, and if people follow me, that's just lovely. But equally, I know that first and foremost, I have to be the thing that's cared for, because I can care
Yeah.
for all these, because secondary sisters, obviously I run secondary sisters support group, and I do meet hundreds of people, especially in the secondary world, which sadly we do lose a lot of people. And
Yeah.
mentally that
And
is really tough.
is it hard hearing their stories? And you have to be in the right place to hear their stories when you are going through what they're going through as well. How do you cope with
Oh,
that?
absolutely. Yeah, it's hard. I do think I've got better at not taking on everybody's grief or burden. And if someone does pass away in the community, I grieve for them. I, have a few words in my head for them. I might look at their picture, but then I put that aside and I say, well, they're not me. They'd want me to live for them. And I can't take on that grief. And we have to learn to, and I'm sure you did it as well, being a surgeon, you have to be able to kind of shut out that noise sometimes and not constantly be thinking about it, because it's really upsetting. And also, their story is not your story. And I'm sure you as well, being like in the recurrence world, people often either maybe mistake that for a stage 4 or want to think, oh, are you going to be in that state? And you're surrounding yourself with people that are in that community that might be you one day. But it's that real fine balance, isn't it? About helping, supporting, being involved, but pulling away when you need that space. And I mean, you've spoken openly about your mental health and the fact you have suffered with suicidal thoughts in the past. Obviously, you've got to be really careful about not allowing that to come in and take over, to allow your own mental health, the support that needs.
Yeah.
How do you...
I think it...
Sorry, I was going to just say, how do you cope with that side of it? Do you find that there's any coping mechanisms for mental health stuff?
So I'm on antidepressants, the citalopram, which also help with the hot flushes. I've been on those for years. And that does help keep me on a relatively even keel.
People are so anti them, aren't they? People are so anti-antidepressants. I
don't know why.
Yeah.
It's like mental health is an illness. It's an imbalance in the chemicals in your brain. And yes, it can be affected by your hormones, but a lot of people do need drugs to help them get over it. I've had therapy through my local Macmillan Centre, both times I had a recurrence. And for me, that helped because I want someone I can tell all the crazy stuff to in my head who isn't going to judge me. And I don't need to worry about how they feel when I leave the room. I can't be that honest with my husband or my family because they then know what I've said. And how do I help them cope? They can't help me. And that has been brilliant. A bit like journaling, but just talking to someone who says, yeah, that's not crazy. That's normal. You're okay. It's often getting out in nature, walking the dog, feeding the birds and the ducks in the garden, little things like that to just try and ground me. I'm also aware of my physical signs. I know, I'm aware of my physical signs. I know if my sleep pattern starts to change or my eating pattern starts to change. They're often warning signs that I need to look after myself a bit better. But sometimes it can just come up. And when it's kind of combined with anxiety, or you feel a lump, or it's grief. And I think I've learned to tell my husband, I'm having a really bad couple of days and you can't make me better. I just need you to be understanding. And I've learned how to ask people for what I need at that time rather than getting pissed off that they can't mind read.
I think we're
very good at...
Yeah, that we all think that they know exactly what we're thinking, don't they?
I know. Why don't you know what I need? Why can't you get inside my head? Because I haven't told you. That's why.
Well, why am I having a bad day?
Yeah. Exactly. And so there's no reason for me to have a bad day, but mental health is just like that. And I think being kind to yourself and knowing you might need help and talking and journaling are fine, but sometimes those things don't help and you just need 2 days on the sofa eating a packet of chocolate biscuits wallowing.
Oh, definitely.
But my mum would say, right, you've had a week of wallowing now. It's time to get your ass out of sling and move on. It's like, because life does go on and it's a really fine balance. And I wish I knew more about the impact of cancer on your mental health when I was a doctor.
I would be very surprised if you spoke to anyone who's gone through a diagnosis that hasn't suffered one way or another. And again, it's a bit like the whole death thing. Like, people don't talk about depression. People don't talk about being on antidepressants. People still have this taboo around it. Like, why? Ooh, that person's on antidepressants. They must be crazy. They must be a bit weird. They must be, constantly crying. But that isn't depression. Depression can actually be completely, just emotionless. You don't really even have to feel, because it's like we don't know how to feel sometimes. And it's this...
You're numb.
Yeah. And it's this cloud that just kind of hovers. And you don't know kind of how to clear this fog. And when you're very fatigued, when you're very just tired of the noise around cancer, it does get so heavy. And I mean, I've definitely suffered far more with anxiety than I ever knew was possible. I never used to be worried about anything. I get very overwhelmed very easily. And it's not even... I went to a ball, for example, the other week, and I drove. And one of the reasons I drove and didn't want to get a train from the friend's house is because I needed that control, that I knew my car was there. If I started feeling tired or having a moment, I knew my car was there to be able to get home. But I would have never been like that. And little things like that, I notice that, they don't really come across as depression or anxiety to other people. But for me, I'm like, that's a massive thing. The fact that I need my car, because it sort of shows that I'm worried. It's safety. Yeah,
the anxiety is far worse. The anxiety, that sick feeling in the pit of your stomach, your heart racing. I'd never had that until cancer. And we're very good at faking it.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Everything's fine, I'm completely happy, because people don't really want to know how you are when they say, how are you? But it's crippling.
I think we should start being honest and being like, if they ask how we are, yes, it's this, it's that, it's every. Because I think unless they're not mind readers, unless we say it, they don't know.
No. And I think the guilt I felt of having depression the first time, when I had a good job, a good husband, I wanted for nothing. How dare I be depressed when there are people living on the streets? That guilt that you feel, because even as a doctor, I couldn't accept it's not my fault. It is an illness.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think the more we talk about it like that, the better, because, it isn't anybody's fault. The brain is funny. It just does all sorts of stuff to us and triggers, lots of triggers. And I'm sure, again, a bit like you, I've lost my mum. There's times where I just feel this overwhelming grief about her and about not having my mum to give a cuddle to, especially when you're going through your own diagnosis. And
it's awful.
It is.
I'm sorry.
So, and for yourself, parents are just, I often do find that people talk about, I've been to my mum's fatigue, so I'm not feeling well. And I'm like, my mum's not here. And again, you probably have the same. I just want to go to my parents.
I know, the resentment. It's like, I begrudge you. It's horrible. I want to give a couple of plugs if I can. Talking about grief, I'm an ambassador for the Good Grief Trust. And they have so many resources that have helped me cope when mum and dad died. But talking about serious depression, there's a brilliant website called Staying Safe, where you can go online, you can create a safety plan, things to do if you are feeling low, resources to go to if you are thinking sad thoughts. So there is help available for anybody if you are struggling or dealing with mental health issues whilst you're listening to this.
Amazing. That's so useful to know. Just change it slightly. So in your diagnosis over the years, I'm going to sort of ask both. Feel free to sort of touch on one or the other. But what has been your sort of worst part of your diagnosis? But equally, what in your life has changed, which you can actually say has been a massive positive because of your diagnosis?
Oh, I think, God, there's so much. I didn't get the grief that comes with cancer, the things you lose. And I think for me, the thing that shocked me that I wasn't expecting to be so upset about was my fertility.
Yes.
So my husband had a child from his first marriage. She's 10 years younger than me, and she's now got 2 children. So I'm a step granny. But when we were diagnosed, the oncologist said, the cancer's big. We could do save your eggs, but my worry is it'll keep on growing. We want to crack on with treatment. So are you okay with that? And literally within about 30 seconds, my husband and I both said, yes, fine, okay, no egg preservation, onto constipation and diarrhea. And making that decision to never have children in public in a side effects of chemo discussion. Now, we'd only been married a couple of years. And if it had been left up to us, we probably never would have had children. But when it was suddenly the decision being taken away from me, I knew I desperately wanted to be a mum.
It's really difficult, isn't it?
I've got lots of lovely nephews and nieces and my grandchildren, but it's not the same. And people think I should be over that, but it's like, I don't have my own child to teach how to play the piano or bake a cake or sew or
pick up from
ride
school.
A bike. And as I've got book day on Facebook, I find that really triggering now. We thought about adopting, but I thought I've got a high risk of recurrence and I don't want to leave my husband as a single dad in his 60s with a small child. I thought I can't do that to the child or him. I find that really hard. And losing my job and my identity and my financial status. And I think a lot of people assume because I'm a doctor, I still work, but I don't. I do all of this for free. And the thing I'd spent 20 years of my life training to do to the best of my ability is gone. I found that really, really, really hard. But actually, from a medical point of view, the treatment I'm on now is the one thing I never wanted.
Okay.
So I had a second recurrence and I am on palbociclib for life, which is really hard when there's no endpoint. Because I am cancer-free, making myself feel like shit for the next 10, 20, 30 years, possibly for no good reason. But it's the bum injections. Every month, they stick a green needle all the way in each bum cheek and inject a thick, painful substance. And it's the one thing I never wanted as a surgeon. And there's something about bent over a table with your ass exposed. I just feel, plus it's in a room that's 100 yards away from where mum died. It is so triggering. And it's that monthly reminder. I mean, you must have it with your treatment. You can't ever escape it.
It's not getting off the roller coaster that you can't, you
No,
can't see the
I'm
end.
never going to get. No, I'm never going to get off the end. And the oncologist can say, well, you can stop if you like, but if it comes back, how do I live with that guilt? And would my husband forgive me if I stopped and it came back? It's really hard. I think that constant reminder.
So yours is a preventative to stop it becoming a secondary, basically, because it's very high risk.
I've had 2 local recurrences despite chemotherapy, 2 rounds of radiotherapy, tamoxifen, anastrozole, letrozole, Zoladex, having my ovaries removed. I've got a PIK3 mutation, which makes it more hormone resistant. I am much more likely to get another recurrence. So they're giving me this. But it's really tough because you're well. There's no endpoint. But cancer has turned my life around. And people say it's a gift or you're lucky. And I kind of get it. I am a happier, stronger, more fulfilled person, helping far more people than I ever was. I've started doing things I never would, singing in a choir, swimming in lakes in December when the water's frozen over, speaking all over the world, being able to help people. It has opened so many doors. I don't begrudge that bit of my life because I think otherwise I'd have just been a boring surgeon who worked every hour God came and then retired at 60 thinking, what do I do now? But I think I've worked to find the positives. And I think anecdotally, if you think this is the end of the world, then it is. And it took time to find those positives, but I think that can really help you cope. If you can find something to do, something to give back, something just to help one other person cope. And that is why I do what I do.
It's also about not wallowing, is it? It's like we could just sit there and it could be all consuming and we just think about the hard parts. But actually, if we can say, okay, it's not the path we chose. And like, I did want to, to become a mum and I really hoped I would. But our lives have been transformed in the sense that you probably did think maybe if I could have had a child, like how would life be now? And you sort of look at everyone around you who's doing that, who, are having babies, are doing the school run, are becoming grandparents, for example. And you're sort of sitting there going, well, that's not going to be me, but how can I make my life more worthy? And how can I feel like I'm doing something that's good for not just yourself, but maybe for your husband and your family? And so you've got this identity that isn't just cancer, because it's that identity thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, during chemo, all anyone wants to talk about is cancer.
Yeah.
Because they don't know anyone else. Like, I'm not a cancer patient, I'm Liz.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you go back to taking time out to look after you as a person. So you retain that identity that is true to you and you're not defined by cancer. You're not defined by what you put out on Instagram or social media. You have to hold on to what is important to you.
Absolutely. And what made you start the podcast? Because equally your writing and journaling was one thing and obviously especially your Instagram page, but podcasting as well is another thing, isn't it, on top? But what sort of made you want to have these conversations in person?
So I think everyone seemed to be having a podcast and I thought, well, I should have one because everyone else does.
Why not? Yeah.
No idea how hard it was in funding it myself. I think people well, I'm an educator. I used to teach people on surgical courses and people get information in various ways. And some are visual, some like to listen, some like to read. And I thought actually my first podcast was called Don't Ignore the Elephant. I just wanted to talk about difficult stuff like death and dying and body image and bulimia and just having conversations with people because I quite like talking and it's fun, but I didn't realize quite how hard work it is to keep going, to keep coming up with the content. It is draining. And I wonder whether that is the thing I will stop. But then you get one person say, I listened to your podcast about sex and I listened to it with my husband and we're now dating again. You think, oh, okay.
And these conversations, I think, are much more, when you have them in person, it's so different to reading it in a book.
Yeah.
Because it is that sort of topic that you wouldn't normally talk about, things like sex, dating, like low libido, anything, pain.
Yeah.
People don't discuss that. I mean, the amount of times I've had a conversation with my friends and they're sort of nervous about talking about it. They might, because they've had cancer too. And you end up just chatting about, I don't know, all sorts of intimate stuff over the course of a conversation that you would never have spoken about had you not brought up this subject in the first place.
No. And it's not ChatGPT, it's real.
Good. I
really like having those conversations and getting them out there. And for me, it's a chance to be open and honest and vulnerable and show a different side of myself. So I do really enjoy doing it. Although I don't listen to podcasts myself.
Do you not?
I'm not a podcast. My husband listens to American politics podcasts at double speed. Seriously. I was like,
And you
can't cope.
I like it in a car. I find now I listen to podcasts in a car a lot because sometimes music just isn't, I don't know, it's just there. Where a podcast I can really get into, and it's like a storybook, I suppose. If you listen to audiobooks, it's actually something you feel like someone's talking to you or with you, and someone's in the room. But equally, I find it very interesting. I have listened to a couple of cancer podcasts. I've listened to some that are completely irrelevant from cancer and health, and the amount of sort of things I've learned from listening to people chat is huge. I mean, you're going to have to listen back to this one, aren't you? So, you're going to have to listen
I am.
this.
And I listen to more now. And I think it's realizing I'm not alone. And there are people going through what I'm going through. And the more we talk about it, the better.
Oh, completely. It's a very lonely space, but there are many elements and charities and organizations and people out there that if you just are willing to kind of open yourself up to them. But I think it is getting more. I mean, I was diagnosed at the age of 25 back in 2014. There's nothing. There was no podcast. There was no journaling. There was no social media about it. You might get an article in the newspaper every so often, but often it would just be the negatives. They've passed away. They've had this treatment. Something bad's happened.
Yeah.
But actually, there is so much out there. There's so much more awareness and real people, yourself, myself, other people within the community sharing real stories, real opinions, real side effects. You can always find the answer. And everyone I've found as well is if you ask them a question, generally they'll answer and they'll come back to you and they'll want to try and help. And it's that makes the community such a special one. It's very close. I mean, we've all met in various circumstances at different events. The charities out there are incredible. They do so much. They support the community. But, I think it's amazing what you're doing in the sense of, especially the debunking myths. There's so many myths out there that people get so misunderstood. And the topics, you make it fun. You make it lighthearted. You make it interesting. I mean, for someone who doesn't know cancer, it's a great way of them finding out how their friend is or how their parent is. Because sometimes you don't want to ask the questions to the actual person, but actually just being able to have a look on, your social media or listening to you or reading your book, it's just incredible content. I really enjoy it.
Oh, thank you. It's I just want to help people, and I knew how many questions I had. And actually, what was interesting was I used to write academically. So you said 100 words. Well, that's half a sentence for me. My PhD, it's like really, really long words. And when the cancer book came out, I had to write an article for the Mail on Sunday. And suddenly I had to learn how to write for the general public. I think the average reading age of an adult in the UK is actually 9 years old.
Okay.
So learning how to explain cancer, not using medical words. And it's fun. And it just, like you said, it awakens that creativity, gets another side of your brain going. And when I'm thinking about how to make a video about cancer stage, I'm not thinking about me.
Yeah.
I'm just, and I want to say thank you for everything you've done. We need people like you just to keep pushing things forward and reminding us of the positives. I think it always seems to be the people who die that hit the news, and it's tragic. But we don't hear, in the primary community, all the women who are living for years and years and years who die of something else. We don't hear the success stories. We don't hear a lot of people with metastatic disease who are living longer than 3 or 4 years. And I think it's constantly saying, don't write us off.
Yeah, we're still here, we're still living, we're still able to enjoy. And just allowing that person who may have been newly diagnosed, either primary or secondary, to have someone to follow that has hope. Gives them that hope, gives them that, like, I can't travel. Like, how many of us didn't know we could travel when we first get diagnosed with cancer? I know. You think, I'm not going to be able to travel. I'm not going to be able to get insurance. I'm not going to be able to, I don't know, come off my drugs for a few weeks or do something. And actually just being able to see that people can live and live fairly well.
Yeah.
It's a very different living well, I must say. We have to learn, you were saying, the fatigue, massive side effect. All the menopausal side effects. Again, we don't talk about menopause. It's such a big topic. No. Don't talk about it. But it's so... I mean, I don't know about you, but my brain fog is awful. My concentration is awful. My word, I mean, I'm surprised I haven't stumbled too much now, but I'm normally so forgetful with words. Or I literally look at something and go, what is that? I can't even remember the name of a TV remote or an iPad or something.
I call it an orange.
Yeah.
I know it's not an orange, but I can't remember the word for the word orange and my brain is gone.
Oh my gosh. And you're like, it's that thing, the thing. And it's just really frustrating. So it's living well, but it's also allowing ourselves to realize we're not going to be the pre-cancer Laura, the pre-cancer Liz, the
Yeah.
person we were before. It's just finding that new narrative. It's finding that new personality, that new and that ability to say, I just don't know the answer because my brain is not working today. And being
Yes.
honest.
And I think for me, it's giving myself a break. So my energy levels now kind of start at 7 out of 10 and go down to 3 or 4 every month. And accepting you don't have the energy you used to because of the cancer drugs. So stop trying to fill your weeks and don't feel bad that you can't do what you used to do.
Yeah.
And if you go to London for the day, you need a day off because these are the drugs and you have cancer. And I think sometimes I'm in denial and just accepting, which can take time. This is how I function now, and I'm going to function to the best I can, knowing what my limits are.
Yeah. It's hard to do. It's very hard to do. I'm a peep. I like to be around people. I like to be busy. I fill my diary, and often I do crash and burn because I've done too much. But I'm trying. I mean, I'm getting better over the years, but I'm trying to balance my life a bit better. I'm trying to say, okay, if I've got a busy week or a busy day, that I plan to have that little bit of rest and that little bit of, just shut down to allow us to recharge and get back to living, because that's obviously ultimately what we all want to do. We are going to ask you a few questions that we ask everybody. It's quick fire. So we'd like to just get your answer on it. So yes, just answer as much as you can. So what advice would you give to someone who is worried that they might have cancer?
Go and get it checked out. The mental stress of worrying is horrific. It's not your job to worry. If you're concerned, ring your GP and say, I think I've got cancer, and get it seen. Please don't wait. The mental anguish isn't worth it.
No, that's so good. And, you're never wasting their time, are you? And I think that's what people really worry about, is wasting doctors' time.
Most people in breast clinics don't have breast cancer. Over 90% of the women we see don't have breast cancer, but they all think they do. So please just go and get it checked out. You're not wasting our time. It's what doctors are there for.
Absolutely.
We may make you think you're wasting our time, but you're not.
I love that. What was the most impactful thing someone did for you after your diagnosis?
My Uncle Peter. He's a simple old soul who lives in Scotland, and every Friday for the first year and a half, he sent me a card just to talk about the birds in his garden.
That's
just staying in touch.
That's beautiful. And I love the fact you sort of knew instantly that one thing. I think that's obviously meant so much to you, and what an incredible thing to do. And it's just those small things, isn't it, that make such a difference? It doesn't have to be a big gesture.
It's getting something through the post. It's not a bill.
Yeah. Or an appointment letter.
Or an appointment letter. Exactly.
Because that's what I get. It's either a text message, a letter, an email. It's always something. What's the worst thing someone has said to you about having cancer?
Oh, gosh, there's so many. I think I'm finding it really hard to think of the worst one now.
Oh, well, if you've got a few, if you've got a couple.
It's just breast cancer. It's one of the good ones.
Yeah.
I think.
I don't know why people think it's a good one.
But so as a doctor, you see a 90-year-old woman with a tiny cancer, which is never going to do anything. And then you see the young women who are diagnosed. So there are good and bads in that cancer. I think there's a bit of breast cancer is lucky that there are so many different lines of treatment and so many drugs available. And there is so much research out there to make people aware. So compared to a rare cancer like bone cancer, they get a fraction of that. But breast cancer is killing women and men every day, and it's not a good cancer to have. And I think people don't know what to say. You know what it's like. They say something, and I've learned to take it with a thick skin and not get upset or pissed off now. But tough in the beginning. Yeah. What about you?
Oh gosh, I can't remember what I said on the thing. I think it's I think for me it was actually more about my reconstruction. I remember someone wanting to they asked me how it is to have a breast enlargement or breast surgery. I can't remember the way it was worded, and I felt that was quite insensitive in the sense that I was like, it's not a boob job. This is something I haven't had a choice about, and that just I think it's because it wasn't that choice thing, and I had to have them removed. And they're not boobs anymore. They are hard balls on my chest. I mean, you didn't have reconstruction, did you?
I did.
Oh, did you? And
I had an implant reconstruction, nipple sparing, and I was planning to go flat because radiotherapy made it really painful. And that's when we found my first recurrence.
Right, yeah. So it's not an easy decision to make either way.
No.
When you say flat, when you have
numb.
Yeah, there's nothing there. It's just a ball in your chest. What advice would you give to someone recently diagnosed with cancer?
I tell them they're not alone. And I would start looking for information on a charity website like Breast Cancer Now, or go to my book and try to take it slowly and only see what you need to see. And I'd say you don't need to share your life on social media. You don't need to go on social media to find out. There are no rules, so please go at your own pace and ignore everybody else's journeys because they're not you.
Yeah, really good advice. And I do I really think the same about the pace thing. It's like, don't look too far ahead, isn't it? It's like, focus on what you're doing now. And as you say, not needing to do what everyone else is doing, just concentrate on.
It's like, yeah, the first thing I did was Google metastatic blogs, but I'm a breast surgeon. I had weird information. I needed to know just how bad it could be to then come back to where I was now. Yeah. But I wish I hadn't done that.
Okay. Yeah. It's hard. There's some dark sites out there, aren't there? It's really difficult.
Yeah.
And what is the biggest lesson that you've learned from having cancer?
Whilst handbags and shoes are important, it's all about the memories you make with the people you love.
Yeah, definitely agree with that one. It's so important. And a pretty handbag's nice, but no one's gonna remember that, are they?
No. At my funeral, they're not going to say, God, she had a great handbag.
Or they might say they want your great handbag.
They can have it if they ask me nicely.
They might want that. Do you have any, before we wrap up, do you have any organisations, charities? You've already mentioned a couple of different support websites, but do you have any that crop up now that you really want to talk about before we wrap up?
Yes, there's a couple. So I would say Mummy's Star is a fantastic resource for anyone diagnosed with cancer whilst they're pregnant or breastfeeding in the first year, to support mums and their partners and their families. It's just brilliant because you can feel very, very lonely. I think the websites like Breast Cancer Now and Macmillan are fantastic. CRUK, if you've got a query about does something cause cancer, they pay people to do the research and they will tell you the truth. And then finally, there are 10,000 cancer diet books on Amazon. Most of them are absolute BS. But the World Cancer Research Fund, or is it Federation? Can I quickly Google this? Sorry.
Of course.
And then I'll do that again. Do you want to get it right?
Oh, we need to get the right address on it, and then we can make sure we put it out.
Yeah, sorry, 2 seconds. I can't type.
Well, we can't do more than one thing at once, can we?
Yeah, no, so, okay. So I would say also there are 10,000 cancer diet books on Amazon, and the World Cancer Research Fund has all the latest updates on what you should eat after cancer to prevent it coming back. If you want to know what to eat, supplements, all the stuff about processed food, go there. They've got all the evidence for you.
That's amazing. And for yourself, where can we find you? Give us a little lowdown of your Instagram handle,
I could be really shallow and say just type Liz O'Riordan into Google and you'll find me. My website is liz.o'riordan.co.uk, and that has links to all my social media handles. Instagram is the big one, @O'RiordanLiz. But I also have a YouTube channel, Dr. Liz O'Riordan. That's like a library of all my content, so you can find it. And my next book, The Cancer Roadmap, is coming out on the 30th of January, and that's available for pre-order now on Amazon.
Amazing. Oh, we cannot wait to see it out, read it, and we wish you all the best with everything in your journey, and thank you for everything you do in the community. And I'll be watching everything that you bring out in future. So thank you, and really appreciate your time today and coming on here to have a chat.
Thank you. I loved it.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening, and thank you to our amazing supporters and funders who make this podcast happen. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a review and follow us on social media @Thrive Against Cancer. And be sure to check out our other episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. If you want to help support our mission to give a voice to the cancer community, please contact us or visit our website to learn more at thriveagainstcancer.co.uk.